Hey, worship leader, welcome back to the channel. Today I have a special guest, first-time guest on this channel, John Dirks. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Jimmy. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, the reason I wanted to have you on is because, we communicated over email, and you shared with me the vision behind Livestream Mix Co., right?
Yes, sir.
That was called?
Yes, sir.
Make sure.
Yeah.
So I want to have you on here because I think it can help a lot of people, and that's what Hey Worship Leader is all about, sharing resources, being a resource. And this is an area where it's actually not my expertise at all. So I figured, this is good to have you on here and at least share what you offer, the resources, maybe give some tips or whatever. And that's mixing, specifically live streams. And at my church, production side of things is all its own, section, category. Why are words escaping me? I don't know. Division, department.
There you go.
There it is. It's its own department, and so I don't ever get into mixing much at all. I just hear it after it's done, and so but I'm learning, and so I love to learn from people who do it all the time. But yeah, let's right at the top. Just tell us what you offer and kind of what you share with me in the email, and where people can get it.
So we started this project back in like August of 2022, so it's pretty new still, but it just came out of some work that I was doing. I'm a mix engineer, and I do a lot of studio releases for churches. And through the years of doing that, I had churches ask me to mix their live streams in post, and they'd send me all their files, and we'd, whether it was a Christmas Eve service, something special, or even if it was just like a weekly sermon that they needed mixed. And so through doing that, I thought, man, what could we do to bring this to churches who are actually live streaming and they're not just uploading posts? Is there something that we can do to help them? And we landed on this idea of building out templates. And, anybody who's familiar with mixing for broadcast, a lot of the time you're using a board. Sometimes you're just taking a auxiliary output out of the front of house board. Sometimes you're using a DAW. And the goal of a live stream mix is to recreate what's happening in the room. And as I started to look at what some churches were doing, even if they had a great live stream mix, a lot of the time it just didn't feel like you were there. It felt still like the person was on the outside looking in at a service that they wish they could have been at. And so we started trying to build templates that really felt like you were there. And we also tried to build templates that were easy for churches to understand. There's a lot of template solutions out there, a lot of mixed solutions out there, but so many of them are difficult to set up quickly. They're difficult to train volunteers on. And if they sound good at the beginning, over time, it seems like they shouldn't, but they somehow degrade. And, mics get moved and people switch out guitars, and now the mix doesn't really sound good anymore, and there's just no upkeep. So we started this project with those things in mind. How can we create things that are volunteer friendly, that sound amazing, that sound like you're in the room? And how can we offer people a way to keep them sounding good? And that's why we started the LMC, the Live Stream Mix Company. We're building templates. We're working with churches to take their multi-tracks and build out a template specific for them. And then we're offering support for that through updates that they can apply for. And we'll go in and fix what they need fixed, adjust, add new channels, whatever they need to keep those things working well.
And you can do all those updates remote?
Yes. Yep. Wow. So the churches are just recording their multi-tracks from a Sunday, just running it into Ableton, Logic, Pro Tools, whatever they have, and they send that over. We take it and put it in their template that we have on our end. We each have a copy of it, and we make any updates or changes and then send them back over a new template.
Wow, that's awesome, man. I think that's really cool. So since I'm new to the world, and maybe some worship leaders are new to a position and they know their mix sounds bad, you were describing it to me, and I'm not back there. I don't know that at our church we use a DAW. I think they might, like what you were saying, might just go out. Are there pros and cons using a DAW? Obviously, there's presets. What would you say to someone who's trying to figure out what they should do? Yeah,
definitely. So there are advantages to both. With a console, obviously all the faders are literally at your fingertips. You're not having to use a mouse. You can quickly move around to different parts of the mix, from the drums to the vocals, and it ends up being a little bit of a faster process than mixing on a DAW, but there are a lot of limitations. You only have a certain number of plugins you can use. Typically, unless you have a very high-end console, there really aren't any de-essers or any kind of multi-band compression, nothing like that. And so a DAW gives you everything that a console gives you and then some. So if it's an issue of quality and if it's an issue of, well, we just want the best, then a DAW is typically the way to go. But there's always situations where a church may just not be the right fit for a DAW. Maybe they don't have somebody who knows anything about, running a computer. Maybe they have no way to get it from their front of house board to a computer. In those cases, of course, then you just want to focus on getting your front of house mix right, or you want to maybe buy a secondary console that's designated for live stream. But ultimately, a DAW is going to give you the most flexibility if you have the knowledge to run it. And that's one of the reasons that we're trying to provide these templates designed in a specific way, is because sometimes a DAW can be a learning curve. We're trying to cut that learning curve down by getting a lot of the heavy lifting done and then giving churches like basically a checklist for a Sunday morning that says, as long as you have the gain set at -10 on every channel, as long as you have all the faders at unity, you're going to be 90% there to the mix that you want, and then you can tweak from there so that they have a little bit of peace of mind. That's really what we want to provide, is just they want to sit down and know that this mix is going to sound great. Our drum triggers are going to work. They're going to fire. They're not going to misfire. The vocals are going to sound great. They're going to be up front. People are going to be able to hear it. And they need to be able to do all of that in minutes, and their volunteers need to understand it. So that's really the goal, is to make it accessible.
Yeah. So if someone was like, okay, I want to go this route, I want to at least get a DAW. Do you care if it's Ableton and Pro Tools? Like, what's your favorite? What's your go-to?
Yeah. Well, the go-to is Pro Tools. I think it's the best for mixing. A great option is Logic, though. Most churches are buying Mac computers anyway, so a lot of the time you just get Logic preloaded on there. Super simple. For churches that are using PreSonus gear, Studio One is an excellent option. It integrates really well. And it's also a great option for Windows users. If you're not using Mac, Studio One is really great for that. So those are the 3 DAWs that I recommend. Usually don't recommend Ableton for mixing. It's a little bit more difficult to mix in Ableton and keep everything straight. But yeah, Logic, Pro Tools, Studio One, all great.
Nice, very cool. Okay, so when you see churches and then you see their live stream, because I'm sure you see a lot, because you have to figure out what the problems are to make this template. What do you see the most? Is there something that's pretty common, like, oh, I know these vocals, they're not going to stand out, or do you have something that people can work on?
Yeah, man. I mean, I think that it seems like there's levels. You get the church who is just starting their live stream and they're just taking it off the board. And if they have a good front of house engineer, the vocals are clear, it sounds great, but it's lacking fullness, it's lacking saturation, it doesn't feel immersive. And then you get churches who maybe dove right into a DAW right away, but didn't really know what they were doing, or didn't think about the taste of it, and they just have like this snare sample. Like, I feel like churches are in love with snare drums, right? And so, and I love snare drums too, but a lot of the time in this live stream, it's like everything sounds normal, and then there's just this snare that goes, it's enormous. It's like way too big for the room, too big for the band. The kick drum sits way out in front, and those things are appealing, right? Because that's what makes it rock, is the kick and the snare drum. But there's ways to do that tastefully and make it feel like, again, you're in the audience and you're not hearing a giant snare drum go, it sounds like a normal snare drum. And so I think that those things are good to keep in mind. Another thing is, a lot of people don't put enough room ambience in their live stream mixes. It feels like the mix is right in front of you rather than being all around you, which again, if you're in a room, you hear the instruments coming from all around you because it's bouncing off every wall and feels very immersive. So just making sure that you keep things sounding wide and like you're in the mix, not looking inside a box.
Wow. That's awesome, man. So like, what's your main demographic? Somebody's listening, like, I don't know if I need this. I don't know if I need it. Like, what's your appeal? You're like, no, you need this if.
Yeah, I think that you need this if you can't achieve a consistent mix every week. If it's changing, some days it sounds great, some days it doesn't. If you're having trouble getting your volunteers to mix the way you want them to. This is another really great thing about using a template, is because when we've mixed it, We have all the faders set at 0, all the gains at -10, and we've done all of the rest of the leveling and mixing within the plugins. And so what you get is you get a very streamlined format that churches have to follow, and the volunteers then kind of have to fall in line. Churches talk to me all the time and they say, hey, we've got this one guy who's really great, but we've got some of these other people who, they feel like this one thing should be super loud, and we don't really like that, but it's hard to tell them in all of these political kind of discussions and leadership discussions. So it can be really nice to provide them, your volunteers, a framework, and that gives them the best chance to win at making you, the leader, happy, and at creating the live stream that you want. And so we give you that. We give you kind of a framework. Here's kind of how things need to be set in order for this to operate, and it clears up a lot of things. So those two things, consistency, volunteer friendly, and then I think the other big reason is if you're just not getting the quality that you want. I've been doing this for a long time, and I've learned a few tricks along the way. And the other engineers that we're working with are also professional, studio and live mix engineers who do this day in and day out, and they all just sound really fantastic. And it can be a great learning thing too, to kind of figure out, okay, this is what we could sound like. Most churches are completely blown away by what their band is actually capable of sounding like. They didn't know it could be that good. And a lot of the time it really can.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I'm thinking of one more question. So like at my church, I have two different drummers. And I think the volunteer people who mix, just even in front of house, they have to mix differently depending on the drummer that's in the room. When you provide presets, is it like, would that be something you would ask, like, hey, how many drummers do you have? And make a preset for drummer 1, drummer 2 that week, in case it's different? Is that something that goes into that too? Maybe different guitar players?
Yeah. So on our website, if you were to get a template with us, you'd go on, you'd fill out a form, and you'd give us all the information about your church. And then at the end, we would ask for how many players you have, vocalists you have. And whenever we list vocalists, we're asking for the total amount of volunteers you have in rotation. So not the amount that's on stage in any given Sunday, but the total amount, because we're going to create an individual profile for each one of those singers. Same thing for guitarists. If you have 3 different lead guitar players, unless they're all using the exact same guitar, same pedals, and same amp, then we're going to create 3 separate profiles for them as well. Drums are one of the exceptions because pretty much everybody uses the same drum kit. However,
that's true.
Some drummers are heavy-handed, some drummers are light-handed, and that's where the gain really comes into play. So when we give you the checklist, it'll say all channels need to be set to -10 gain. So on the Sunday when your heavy-handed drummer is playing, you might have to go and pull all those gains down -5 on all the drum channels, and then they're at -10. The mix will then sound good. You got your light-handed guy, you might have to boost it 3 or 4 dB, then it trickles down and the mix still sounds good. So it's all just about making sure that those gains coming into every channel are at -10 across the board, and then you're all set.
And then you do ongoing support. So let's say, it's been 2 years, but it's in our budget now. We just replaced all the drum heads and everything sounds weird. Then they call you and say, hey, this is we just changed this. You can help us again, do an update.
Yep, exactly. You can go on. There's a section you can apply for an update, send it back in. We keep all the files. So we have your template from the last time we worked on it. We'll have a discussion with you about what do you need changed? What's kind of the issue? What are you running into? And sometimes they want to add new channels. Sometimes they're like, hey, we actually wanted to spend some money on this new plugin. We bought it. Can you implement that in? And so we'll implement that plugin, any kind of change that they want. So yeah, we offer support like that anytime people need it.
Wow. So is there anything else that you offer outside of this, or anything that people can add on? Yeah,
so we also offer things on the post-production side. So churches will reach out and ask for us to mix their backing tracks so that they can use them for their next service. Or maybe they have a sermon podcast that they need mixed every week. They'll get one of our engineers on retainer and we'll just mix that weekly for them. Some churches don't need templates at all because they're not live. They just upload videos to YouTube after the fact. And so we can mix church online services in post-production as well, either one-offs or retainer. But that's another thing that we're doing too.
That's awesome. Well, I'm excited about this. I think it's a really great resource. I'm excited to share it. Thanks for coming on. Those of you watching, I'll put the links down below so you can go check it out. And yeah, John, thanks for coming on the channel.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jimmy. It was great hanging out with you.
Yeah, you too, man. All right. See you on the next video. Bye.